There she is.
I'm here. I've got everything. I've got no minute.
I just don't know. There was no. Oh God, me and technology. I just. Well, very new. I'm normally the one trying to just log in from the other side, so we'll wait. Oh, I've not started my video. There you go. Come on. I did brush my hair this morning, but you can't tell.
Oh no, well I shaved mine on Monday, yeah. So I got a new razor. Other one were blunt. It kept on in me, so I got a new one. On way back from Scarborough on Monday.
Have you seen the first question?
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not answering that one.
Oh God, I was just starting to Google it, thinking, right, I need to try and get a.
Oh, Jessie's here as well. It's good. It's obviously there. Under the Canaries.
I'm just asking.
Oh well, we better be good then. We better be good. And I think we're also live on YouTube.
Oh wow. I know, it's very exciting, all this modern technology.
Yeah, I'm so glad that Tatiana and Fran were leading on it our side, because if it had been down to me, it wouldn't have happened.
No.
But the chat. Oh, hello, Kira. I'm just waiting now for our speaker. I did email her an hour ago and reminder. Okay, Tracy, that's okay.
So I think it's about 200 people joining us today.
Over 200 people, yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Absolutely. So there's 100 on Zoom and about 120 registered for YouTube, which is live now. So it's been open since 12 o'clock.
Oh Lord, so when we were just talking, when we met up then, Alison, we thought nobody was listening. Were we already on YouTube?
We were already on YouTube, yeah.
So I might as well confess now that we've had a really challenging question that talks about theoretical perspectives. So I think we're all going to have to just...
Yeah, and that's why I was saying I'm glad the question wasn't for me, because I'm a doer. I'm not a theoretical person. So I'm really glad that the panelist will be answering that. Jodie,
I'm not a theoretical person at all either.
So once Jodie arrives, I have to say I'll be very happy.
Yeah, otherwise we've got a lot of filling in to do, Alison.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully we've sorted out the PowerPoint which arrived a couple of days ago. So we are live now on YouTube, everybody who's joining us. Jodie is joining us now.
Jodie is joining us, excellent.
Hello, Jodie.
Hi, Jodie. I've not got your sound yet.
Sound? Any sound?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah. Which is brilliant. So we're a couple of minutes to starting, but just so you know, we are live on YouTube.
Wow, nice.
It's very nice.
On YouTube.
And so far there are 50 participants, and that must just be on Zoom, but obviously we've got a about 120 people also signed up on YouTube.
Nice. So I don't know how how do I present to this?
So we've got a share screen function, and I presume that Tatiana, so you can share screen. Any of us can. So do you want me to get your presentation up?
Oh, you can do it. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, I won't do that then.
Hi Jodie, anyway, I've not met you before.
Hi,
I'm
Ruth.
Ruth. Hiya. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're all very excited.
Conservatory, so the lighting's a bit weird, and so is the angle.
No, we can see you fine.
Oh yeah, there is share screen.
Can
Oh,
you
I
see
could
at the
probably do it.
bottom?
I could figure
Yeah.
it out. Yeah.
You can do
Right.
that.
So there, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'll stop sharing for now. So it's 1 o'clock.
Cool.
There are 71 participants on Zoom, and we're recording live on YouTube. I think we'll wait 1 more minute and then we'll start. Because lots of people have started on time and we want to honour that. And from Jess, Jodie, you look fab. The lighting is great, the angle's great.
Jess.
So you're well lit for the performance that's.
I've not actually I've not had makeup on in about 3 or 4 months, so I would normally look a bit better, but I've just.
Well, it's locked down longer, so we can all, but we can all just relax.
It's been quite nice actually to just not have to go out much.
So if everyone's ready to start, it is 1 minute past 1 o'clock, and we want to be starting in a timely way because lots of people have signed in on time, and it's not right that we leave them hanging on the line. So welcome everybody. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. So my name is Alison Lowe and I'm the Chief Exec of Touchstone. Ruth?
So I'm Ruth Kettle, I'm Chief Exec of Inspire North, and thanks for everyone for coming today.
Jodie?
Hey everybody, I'm Jodie and I work in equality.
Yeah, and you're also an author, Jodie, please.
Yeah,
remember
author, award winner, humorous friend.
So thank you all for tuning in today. I just thought that I'd give a really brief overview as to how we've arrived at this place. So Ruth and I, both chief execs in mental health organisations in Leeds, were talking a few weeks ago about Black Lives Matter and about our challenges, both as employers, but also as parents. And we wanted to come together to show that collaboration during this difficult time is absolutely the only way forward and the right way forward to ensure that the conversations that we need to be having about white privilege, about Black Lives Matter are happening across the city. I had already met Jodie many years ago, and I knew that Jodie had recently written a book which is due out. It's not quite ready for the shelves, the definition of white privilege. And so together we decided that we would invite Jodie to come along today to talk about some of her experiences, both as a Black woman, but also as an expert in the equality sphere, and to share some of the highlights from her book. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth now to introduce Jodie. I just want to thank you both for coming in today, but also for being part of this journey with us, for sharing in our passion for equality, diversity and inclusion, and for being prepared to move forward with us together, not just in the city of Leeds, but hopefully across all the areas that we work in the UK. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Alison. So it's my great privilege today to introduce our guest speaker, Jodie Williams. And as Alison said, and as Jodie said herself, Jodie is an equality, inclusion and diversity professional. And she's worked across a variety of sectors, but always with the aim of making businesses more accessible and inclusive. And as Alison has mentioned, Jodie will soon be publishing a book called The Definition of White Privilege. And we hope that today is the start of a conversation and the start of, well, not the start, but the ongoing process of positive action. And we can all think about what we can do as individuals to really make a difference. So Jodie's going to be presenting for about 30 to 40 minutes, I think, isn't it, Jodie? And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end, so you can post your questions on the chat. I'm not sure who's got access to what. If not, you can also email questions into Anna Comerford at Inspire North, and we'll do our best to answer the questions that you ask. So without further ado, Jodie, over to you.
Thank you. So hi everybody, this is like my first presenting to Zoom. So it's a bit of I'm a bit of a newbie to this. So I will start off. I just wanted to start off by telling you a bit about who I am as a person. So if we just scroll down, I've done the presentation as like a PDF. So this is pictures of me and my throughout different stages of my life. So I am I'm Black. I grew up with white parents. So I grew up in a village lovely village in Yorkshire, with a white family, white parents. There's me and my sister, and that was pretty much it. That were the only Black children. And you can see I'm a lot darker than my sister. My sister was able to fit in a lot better when we were younger, especially in the 80s and early 90s. So if you can kind of see her sat next to me in the picture. That's me grinning, still got the same smile. So yeah, I grew up from a very young age experiencing quite overt racism. And I think we lived on a very, like a poor white estate, financially poor, but like fun, very fun. We got up to lots of activities as children. But that it was constant in terms of like just a lot of racial abuse. And I think it's really odd because you kind of grow up just seeing it as the norm. Like I just knew I was different to my family, and I just kind of grew up thinking that was how it was. And I didn't really realize that it wasn't supposed to be like that until I then started to become a bit more aware. And then as I went through school, I was in and university and college, I was always in majority white spaces. So when these are school pictures of me, and I think there's like one or two other people that were non-white, people of colour. And then this is me 2016. So in 2016, I worked in the top left. I worked with a group. Oh, if we go back, the top left there, the black and red picture. Yeah, I worked with a really good group of women to organise the 2016 Black Lives Matter march in Leeds, and it was phenomenal. I was at ITV at the time. And I think for me, it was really a movement to see how important and how much it was needed then, and like even more so now. So yeah, that's me. I think from a young age, I was quite passionate about equality. It probably started with, so I've been veggie and now vegan since I was like 6 years old. And as soon as I realised that things were being harmed, just for the benefit of my taste, I just didn't want any part of it. And then it kind of snowballed from there, and I turned into a bit of an activist child, and then just kind of grew my interest around equality, really. So I think, so yeah, that's my kind of background. I don't know if you want to hear some of the specific examples as a child. I grew up with like my cousins calling me racial slurs. Yeah, there's some interesting examples. I can share more if people actually want to hear it, but I'm sure people don't. So yeah, and then I guess as my mum having a black child in the 80s, at the start of it, it was not a very popular decision for her. So our family initially didn't take it too well, which resulted in my mum kind of being on her own for a bit, and then she was letting allowed back in. But for the start of it, I think it was a very interesting time, I guess, to be born and raised, which probably shaped a lot of my views. So this next slide is when we do this session in face to face, we do a bit of an icebreaker. So it's more around identity, just to show that people are just multi-layered and multifaceted. So when you kind of look at the different labels, I ask people to pick out one of them. There's one that's not true, and if you can see it, feel free to pick it out, have a look, pick it out, and then you can share it at the end or not. But it's quite a fun game usually, because the one that people pick is not usually the one that's the wrong one. But we can come back to that if we've got time. So I guess quickly, another icebreaker is, if you have a paper and a pen and you can write, and if not, just think of, just I guess take a few minutes to just draw one of those pictures. So a picture of a footballer, a mother, a builder, couple, actor, just to scribble them down, and then I'll come back to it at the end. So introductions, done me. I think we'll go through definitions next. I think I think when we're talking about race and race equality, people use terms interchangeably, and I think it's really good to just be quite clear on the definitions that we're talking about. I'll then give you a bit of background to the piece of work that I did and how it came about, and then we'll talk about race equality and then some examples from the book. So definitions, we'll start off with prejudice, and I think people will already know this, but I think it's really good just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same playing field and the same page when we're talking about things. So a preconceived opinion that is not based on a real reason or an actual experience. It's just our brains filling in the information for us. Unconscious bias, I think we all know what that one is. Again, our brains making unconscious quick decisions without us even knowing, so we just come to conclusions without even being aware of it, and we might catch ourselves afterwards. I've started to do it a bit more. So I'll say something. I worked at the hospital at the LGI on weekends for over a decade, and I just got into the habit of referencing nurses to her and just using that pronoun, and I've had to work so hard to just break the habit, because my unconscious bias just constantly tells me that nurses are women, which is just not the case whatsoever. Are only women. And then discrimination, so treating someone unfairly, usually based on prejudice or bias. White privilege, which we'll talk more about. Inherent advantages possessed by a white person. And I think when we'll get to the actual piece of work, a lot of the conversations I have with around white privilege, people tend to automatically link it to economic privilege. So sometimes when I have conversations about it, I'll start to talk about it, people automatically say, well, we grew up on the same estate, we financially grew up both quite poor, so why do I then carry a privilege? And it's not necessarily an economic advantage, it's specifically around how society views people that are racialised as white. And I sometimes say racialised as white or racialised as black, because if anybody's read the Akala's book, Natives, it really helped me to understand the dynamics of race in society, because it might not necessarily be someone's identity, but if society racialises you as in that way. So I have my niece would be racialised as white, even though that's not her heritage, but she would still benefit from white privilege because that's how society sees her. And And then we have racial harassment is inciting an incident or a series of incidents intended or likely to intimidate, offend or harm people of colour. So I use people of colour, which are people racialised as non-white, but I prefer the term people of colour. I know there's a lot of conversation as to what we should and shouldn't be using. I really don't like the term minority, because I think I don't mind people using it, but maybe I do. But I know that people struggle with language, but my personal preference is not the term minority, or I don't really like being called a BAME as well, but because I think it's associated, people associate the disadvantages and the disparities with being a minority. And I got this after doing this piece of work, after doing the book. I had quite a few messages and comments basically saying you're in a country that is majority white, so this is why you experience those things. But I don't think that that's always the case. So sometimes I go abroad and I might become the majority, but there's still certain systems of privilege that I don't benefit from. So the issues that I face, that I guess people of colour face a lot of the time, they're not necessarily specifically because of being a minority in a majority country. And then also, like, worldwide, when you look at people of colour, we're not necessarily a minority, which is why I personally don't like the term. So then we look at racism. So ism is a distinctive practice, system or philosophy, typically a political ideology or an artistic movement. So the ism is really important to me in the word racism. And I think we have to really understand that the racism is an ism by definition. So it's systemic by definition. So racism is then prejudice plus the power, which usually results in that ism as a system. So I don't know if anybody's seen those posters somebody has gone around, and this is the image on the left, and put posters up. I think it started in Bristol, explaining kind of different terms around race equality just in the public. And I saw them and thought they're quite interesting. So looking at the ism and the definition of kind of that systemic racism, stereotypes about white people are examples of prejudice, not necessarily racism. Racial prejudice refers to discrimination based on assumptions of race and skin colour. This can be directed at white people, but in terms of like that, when you look at the statistics and the reports, so the David Lammy review, the McGregor Smith review, the Race at Work survey, there's so many research papers on it, that the kind of like the inequalities that people of colour face are at they're at that systemic level, which results in things like Black women being 5 times more likely to die, or in childbirth, or not necessarily getting the same access to healthcare, not necessarily getting the same access to jobs or to be on boards. So it's kind of, it is literally the structural piece. So if we scroll down, so then just a bit about the piece of work. So I'm quite active on social media. I have now, like, I go through phases around just trying to educate. I've got obviously friends and family. I've had a lot of conversations recently, and then in 2016 when we did the march, then just around race equality with family members and friends, and why it's important. So I guess we've been in it's been one of probably the strangest year I've ever experienced. 2020 is one that I think that we'll all remember. And there's a certain feeling that, I don't know if anybody saw the murder of George Floyd. I really wish I wouldn't have watched the video. I really should have scrolled past, because it was absolutely horrific. I just wish I would have watched that. And I think that just having to go on social media or interact with media as a whole, and constantly see people like you being treated in a completely different way, is just very draining. And I then I started to just share my day-to-day experiences of white privilege and stuff that I kind of experienced when I was younger, stuff that I experience now. And it's not like, so the experiences are not like, they're not, some of them are not huge things, they're just little things that might be frustrating in that time, and I just have to find a workaround. So a lot of the time I just end up finding quick workarounds for them. And when I speak to people, they really struggle sometimes, if they don't experience it, to understand what it is or how that impact happens. So after I shared mine, I asked people to share theirs, and the response I got was just absolutely amazing. There was hundreds of people messaging me their day-to-day experiences of white privilege, and it wasn't all. It was a mix of people. It wasn't just people of colour. White people were messaging me too with their experiences and how they think they benefit from the systems of privilege. So then I started to put them all together in a blog. I wanted it to be easy to read. So I wanted it to be really easy to read for people to just really understand the day-to-day lived experiences. And it's, for me, I've always seen my difference as a really, really big positive. I think differences are absolutely amazing in society. We need diversity to be able to flourish, and I think we all just need to embrace that. We seem to understand, I think as a society, we seem to understand that we need biodiversity for the environment to flourish, but that's the same for humans. Like, we need that diversity for us to flourish, and I think everybody's differences should be acknowledged and celebrated. So I'll share some of the examples. This isn't all of them, and some of them, not all of them, have come from me, and it is just a book. So there's like a page of an example, and then the book is just, I think there's about 100 examples of people's lived experiences of what white privilege is. And they're not in order. These ones are just some that I've pulled out. So white privilege is naturally being able to learn about your history instead of having it confined to 1 month in the year, where your history is just naturally part of the curriculum and you don't have to sign a petition for it to be taught in schools, whereas my history is referred to as Black history when it should just be acknowledged as history, and it shouldn't be confined to a month. That one's really important to me. I absolutely love history, and when I think about what I learned at school, it's just nothing in comparison to now. In Leeds, there's a guy called Joe that does Leeds Black History walks. Don't know if everyone's ever been on one, but I really, really recommend them, because you learn such amazing stuff about our city and about the region, which I just never knew before. So you learn about a guy called Pablo Frank, I think his name is. There was the Egyptian deity Isis. There was a temple in York, which I just think there's some really cool pieces of information that have just never been told to us. So that's quite a big one for me. I absolutely love learning about history, and I think that it should just be naturally taught. It should just be taught. So I mentioned I worked at ITV for about 7 years on this next one, and the conversations I had about equality were at times very interesting, and quite a few of a number of my old colleagues helped to put some of their examples in. So I've had conversations in the past around wanting more representation on TV and being told it's this is kind of the creative sector as a whole saying that it's kind of a risk or it's a niche. So white privilege is being able to watch the TV and see people who look like you and experience stories which are written by people from the same race. Instead, I see actors who are typecast and told that it isn't possible to have 2 or 3 Black leads in a TV series because then it becomes a niche. So yeah, quite a few people have, because there were hundreds of responses, they kind of fell into categories and themes, and there was a lot around media, and quite a few people acknowledged that one of not being able to see themselves. And then it was whitewashing as a concept was talked about quite a lot around things like, I don't know if anyone's seen, people have probably seen Harry Potter, but there was a character, I think she was called Lavender Hill or Lavender Brown, and when she was a black character, and then when she got a speaking part, they recast her. She became a love interest, I think, with Ron, and they recast her. And that consistently happens, that kind of whitewashing. If anyone has seen Hollywood on Netflix, I would recommend it. White privilege is not being 5 times more likely to die in childbirth in the NHS. There was recently some research around in healthcare. This was I think it was in America, and I think it was a high percentage of doctors and nurses and medical professionals thought that Black people had higher pain thresholds. So they kind of believed that they could take more pain, which was quite worrying. And then also working in the NHS for 10 years was just, again, an experience in seeing, I think just seeing how the lack, I think at the time there was a lack of training. I think there's a lot more now. This was a long time ago when I was there. But there's, I think there's more training, but there was just a lack of training around equality. White privilege, having people from the same race control the media narrative, so you're represented in every role imaginable. I don't know if anybody's seen Raising Dion, but this one was mentioned quite a lot. So Raising Dion is a young child that's got superpowers, and he's a Black boy. And a lot of parents had commented saying that my children have never really had the opportunity to see a Black child have superpowers, and it's just, I guess there wasn't a Black Harry Potter or something that represented their children. So that was quite a big one for parents. So white privilege is having white actors play Black characters and it not be an issue. I think Huffington posted an article, and it's 100, that's my dog barking, sorry if you hear that. There's I think it's 100 times when movies had cast white actors to play a Black role, and I think some of them are actual, like, based on real life stories. But yeah, hints at a Black Ariel, Black Annie or Bond is a worldwide issue. White privilege is not being made aware of your colour constantly. That one was really interesting. A lot of people shared their experiences of when they first was made to feel, like as a child, was first made to feel aware of their colour. First made to feel aware of their difference. I remember mine. I'm assuming there was more before that, but I remember the specific one for me. Sorry. Again, white privilege is being able to buy your child a doll which looks like them, and not having to email the store, pay more, or wait until they get more diverse dolls. I don't know if anybody watches Blackish, but this was actually raised, like, Blackish has been, I really enjoy it, but this was raised in the programme, and quite a lot of people, again, who buy dolls for children thought that this was a big one. White privilege is not having your hair be an issue in the workplace when you have a new style. So I've got to the stage of, I've got a group chat which is specifically about going, like, natural in terms of not relaxing your hair. Hair's quite a big thing for me and some of my my group of friends. So we've kind of started a group chat. It's called The Movement, and I am very comfortable. I change my hair quite a bit. Sometimes I might have braids. I've had wigs in the past. I'm totally going to get into wigs this year. But I change my hair quite a bit, or I might just have it as it is today. It was in plaits this morning and it got taken out. But when I sometimes get my hair done, and because of the comments that I've had in the past, I just dread going into work now with a new hairstyle, because I just brace myself for it's a lot better actually now, but the last couple of years was, I'd say that over the last 10 years, it was interesting just going into work with a new style or braids and having to just deal with the comments that come. So I've gone into workplaces and had people say, you look like Predator, when I've had braids in. Predator doesn't wear braids, they're very different. Someone said, you look like Bob Marley once when I had braids in again. Yeah, it's a very interesting dynamic. Like, you can't just go into the office with a new hairstyle and just say, oh, your hair looks nice. That's all I need. White privilege is not being told to go back to the country where you came from when you're British. I got this a lot as a child, just growing up, where like, just get back to where you're from. And as a kid, I used to just be like, back to the council estate, we're on it already, like back to my street, I don't know what you mean, back to the house, back to my own bedroom. And then obviously as I got real like older, I just realised that they meant to the country. But I am from Yorkshire. White privilege is not having to have conversations about colorism. That's, I think more and more people know what colorism is now and how it impacts, but I think it's just a whole nother kind of social issue that we need to attack, really. And even within that, I have to acknowledge how I would benefit in in colorism, because when I've had conversations with friends who are dark-skinned Black women, and when you look at how, especially in the creative sector when we was at ITV, we'd have conversations, and then again, like outside of racism, when you look at colorism, the way that people are treated depending on how light their skin is a whole other facet of inequality. White privilege is never having the texture of your hair criminalised and called unprofessional. I think there's been legal cases about people going to work with locks in. White privilege is not being expected to represent and speak on behalf of your entire ethnic group. There's a few people, quite a lot of people sent this one in, specifically I think in the creative sector. Sometimes people might be in writing rooms and asked to, they're asked for their opinion, but they know that they're asked for their opinion from, like, in terms of giving their opinion from one entire group. And I think we just need to constantly remember that Black people are not monolithic, we're all individuals. White privilege is being able to say, I don't see colour. I know a lot of people like to say, I don't see colour. This is probably one of my biggest bugbears. I think people are changing, but when people say, I don't see colour, I know what they're trying to say to me is that I won't treat you any differently because of your colour, but what they're actually saying is, I don't see your colour, and it's part of my identity, so they're effectively saying, I don't see you. And like, it's a bad thing, like, I don't see that part of you. I'm not saying you should run up to people and be like, I see your colour. I just think the whole I don't see colour is just a whole denial of part of my identity. Yeah, that was an interesting one. White privilege is not being more likely to die in the middle of a pandemic from COVID-19 because you take up essential jobs and don't get the best healthcare. There's been a lot of, obviously, debates and discussions around why people of colour might be more likely to be affected by the current pandemic. And from the conversations I have, I think people are kind of in agreement that it's mainly because, so when you look at that stat around the Black women being 5 times more likely to die in healthcare, and then when you look at some of the inequalities that are faced in healthcare overall, and then when you look at some of the customer facing key essential roles, I think there's an over and an underrepresentation. So yeah, I guess there's a lot of work to do in that one. White privilege has been able to assume that racial inequality doesn't exist because it doesn't affect you. I think that when we hear people like our, I don't know, leaders of countries say Britain's not racist, racism doesn't exist, I think that's a level of privilege because you've never acknowledged it. So if you've never experienced it and then you say it doesn't exist, I think that kind of plays into the systems of privilege. White privilege is seeing yourself represented at board level as a CEO in FTSE 100 companies, but as a Black woman, you aren't given the same representation. White privilege is then thinking that Black women aren't there because it's the best person for the job and they simply can't be good enough, rather than understanding that there are actual barriers around bias in the workplace. That one came up quite a lot around representation and FTSE 100s from people. I think representation, it comes through quite a lot because representation matters, I think, for everybody. White privilege, I used to think this was just me, and it's really interesting because a lot of them I used to think it was just, I used to think, is this just me that gets a little bit frustrated by this, that sometimes the world's just not, it's just not set up to centre me and my experience, which is I think I've grown up thinking that's totally fine, but it's like the default settings and not my default settings, so I just have to manoeuvre around it. So white privilege is going to a hotel and the shampoo and conditioner is for European straight hair because that's the default, not for Afro hair. So I once went to a hotel and asked them to change the shampoo bottle for a conditioner and shampoo that I can actually use. And their response was, we just have it for normal hair. And I was like, well, my hair is normal. And I think a lot of people, when I've spoke to a lot of people anyway, they said, well, no one really uses those anyway, the shampoo and conditioners in hotels. I totally would use them if they were for my hair. White privilege is not having to Google how racist a holiday destination is before you go there. So I kind of figured this out the hard way. No one ever told me, maybe just check out where you're traveling first. And I remember going on holiday to quite a quiet village, and it just wasn't the most inclusive, specifically in terms of ethnicity. And I do it by default now, and it wouldn't necessarily stop me going anywhere, although there are certain places that I probably wouldn't go because of it. But it's just kind of nice to know what you're getting before you go. So I recently last year I went on holiday to a place in Greece, and I did Google before and it said some of the clubs are racist, so you probably won't get in. I didn't get in, didn't get in, they just weren't letting us in. And at one point they were playing Rihanna and I was like, you didn't realise you're playing Rihanna, but we're not allowed in the club. But there was reviews about it anyway, so I was kind of, a part of it was expecting it. And then there were comments as we was just walking down the street. They were kind of shouting out just random people's black names at us. Just kind of, it was really odd. They asked me if I knew Bob Marley. Look, I wish I did. I was just like, I kind of wish. And then they asked where in Africa I'm from, and then I was like, I'm from a place called Yorkshire, which is in the UK. And they were like, no, but where in Africa are you from? Like, where did you come before that? And then there were some other comments that were not as like easygoing. But then in the same country, we travelled up to another city, which was quite a big, busy city, and it was a totally different experience. So I don't even think it's by country. I think it's by kind of region within that. White privilege is not understanding the history of colonisation and how it affects us, and being able to speak positively about people like Christopher Columbus. I think that's a really interesting one, because I was always, especially at school, he was always shown in this big like founder of the world light, and then as I started to read a bit more, I realised that wasn't really the case. Can't really find places where there's people already there. White privilege has been able to buy your shampoo in large supermarkets, but they don't sell shampoo or conditioner for Afro hair. And then having your hair type defined as normal on a shampoo bottle. Don't even know what the definition of normal is. By skin colour types, this was one that really used to frustrate me. So I've got skin colour types which are not my skin colour at all, just because I like to wear tights when I'm at work. Probably looks very weird. I don't do it anymore. But if I couldn't find any tights and I could only find skin colour tights, I'd just have to get what was available, and it was never my skin colour. There is a few organisations and businesses now online where you can get them, but I've not seen them in my supermarkets that I use. Yeah, white people have been able to buy your skin tone in makeup way before Fenty was a thing. Being able to go to a photo shoot or a pamper day, which I really like to do these, but then when I get there, they just have no clue how to match my skin tone in makeup or to do my hair. So I kind of effectively pay for like a pamper day, makeup day, and a shoot, and then they just have no clue how to manage my hair. This one was quite funny. Having your hair type as an emoji by default. So I use, especially in our hair group, when my hair's like, it's been braided today, so it's a lot flatter, but normally it's quite big. And so big that this probably would have made it into the book. I went to get a new passport picture the other day, and was pretty much told that my hair was too big for the passport picture, so I had to tie it back. But yeah, it's quite big, and I use a little tree. There's like a tree bush to show that my hair's big, because all the emojis have got quite straight hair. So yeah, the McGregor Smith review showed that Asian people, Black people and people of colour are more likely to be looked over for promotion than their white counterparts. So that was quite the McGregor Smith review, if anyone gets to read it, is quite an insight actually. This next one came through quite a lot. White privilege is being accepted into the LGBT community with open arms, a greater pride, and getting into bars with ease. There was so people shared experiences of just totally avoiding certain bars at Pride because they're Black, and it's just not an inclusive space for them. Which in a space which is supposed to be inclusive. And I think Manchester Pride did an article on it actually last year for their Pride, and I think it's really important that we make spaces that are supposed to be inclusive really inclusive for everybody. Treatment for mental health conditions. I think this came out in the race disparity audit around people of colour not getting access to treatment for mental health, not being able to talk about mental health, not getting treatment. Yeah, I think that was there's a race disparity audit. I can share all the reports actually if people are interested. White privilege is going on a night out and being worried that you won't get in because of the colour of your skin. I think a lot of people have experienced that one. White privilege is not having to worry about giving your opinion because she'll get rendered the angry Black person. I see this quite a lot on social media. People, Black women, will engage in discussion and then just get called angry, and there's nothing specifically angry about what they've said. It's just this perception that an opinion is referenced as angry. Not being more likely to be jailed or receive a longer sentence. Again, that was in the race disparity audit. And also the images throughout, I wanted to make sure that people were represented just within that. So there's like different flags as like a signal to say that all groups are acknowledged throughout in the images. Being able to buy a birthday card with someone who has the same skin colour. Being able to be more offended at being called racist than the actual racism. So a couple of years ago, I read White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and I know there's like pros, like positive and negative reviews about the book. But one of the really good things I read about it was that I loved the concept of kind of the good bad binary, which effectively says that sometimes when we call like racism out, and it can be in the undertones of or the nuances in language and behaviour, and when you kind of talk about it or call it out, the person gets really defensive because they think you're calling him a really bad person, when actually you're kind of just, it's not necessarily them that's the really bad person, but something that they've just said is quite offensive. And that really helped. That really helped me, that chapter in that book. White privilege has not been called a risk when it comes to commissioning. So So then the next stage is, I've used this quite a bit and it's probably developed over the years, but just around microaggressions and where the, how it can come out, like how I think how sometimes bias can just play out in everyday language. And some of the examples that came in through the white fragility examples didn't necessarily go into the book, but some of them are in here. So where are you from? Like, where are you from? You know, where are you from? I have that quite a bit, where people they're effectively asking, where are you? I don't really mind the question around talking about my heritage, but it's more the fact that so I'm usually asked where I'm from. Not so much now, more so when I was a bit younger, but I think that we don't ask that question to everybody. So when you think about kind of the context of Britain, people came here from somewhere, and I think when we ask the question to everyone, it kind of helps people to understand that actually we want to learn about everybody's heritage, rather than just, I'm being asked it. When I'm being asked where am I from, I'm specifically being asked where is my colour from, because we don't ask white people the same questions in the same way. My mum is never asked where are you from, or like my grandma would never be asked where are you from, and her family was from Malta originally, so but she just never was asked that where are you from question. And then you're so articulate, you're a credit to your ears. The shock, I've heard this one came from a lot of parents, and the shock when they sometimes think that people are shocked when their kids are smart, like that's like it's not the norm. When I look at you, I don't see colour. So there is only one race, the human race. So this is specifically when talking about kind of race equality. And I think sometimes when people say there is only one race, the human race, they seek to they don't want to understand the differences, because that we are all human. That's totally accurate, but there are differences within us. I've probably not made this the most accessible. A white person clutching their purse. So I've only really experienced this in like walking past cars and they lock their doors, usually when I'm with a group of people. I'm not racist, I have black friends, which is just, I even see this on social media a lot now, people justifying that they're not racist because they have black friends, which is just the most ridiculous notion ever. And then things like, so I was trying to explain some of my experiences once with a colleague many years ago, and they said, oh, I kind of understand, I get it, I've experienced it because I'm ginger. And I was like, it's just not the same thing. Like, you've not experienced racism because you're ginger. It's just, you might have experienced the bullying and harassing, which is not nice and should not happen, but it's not the same. Every qualified person should get the job. Everyone can succeed in this society if they work hard enough. Kind of negates from the barriers that are actually in place. Asking a black person, why do you have to be so loud? So this one came quite through a lot in the white privilege work, just around people in workplaces constantly being kind of over characterized a lot of the time and stereotyped. Person of colour mistaken for a service worker. I used to go to a lot of awards, and I have in the past been mistaken for the person that gets the drinks and the teas. And the first time it happened, I was actually dressed really nice, I'm not going to lie. I looked lovely. And the person still somehow managed to mistake me. And the first time it happened, like, my natural instinct was to get them a drink, just because, like, if somebody asked me for a drink, my natural instinct would be like, yeah, sure, I'll get you a drink. And then I kind of realized what was happening. I was like, oh, probably not. And that's happened, I think it's only happened about twice. But sometimes when some of the events that I go to, the room is not that diverse, which is interesting because there've been diversity events in the past, and the room in terms of ethnicity has still not been that diverse. So I might have only been one or two of the only Black women in the room. Oh yeah, universities and college where wealthy white cis het men are all featured and there's no representation. And I think one of the I used to go to meetings at the House of Parliament. There's been a few events, and you have to walk down these walls, like these big long corridors, and there's paintings of loads of people. And I once asked, one of them was, is it William E. Gladstone? And so I recognised the name of Gladstone as being quite heavily involved in the slave trade. And I was like, why do we have somebody on the wall who was involved in that? Like, why would we want to have that? Why would we want to have that on the walls? And I asked the security guard, and he honestly didn't have any answers for me. Probably not the best person to ask, because I think he just wanted me to continue with my day rather than stood at him talking at him. But yeah, I think going to, and this was again a diversity event, and having to pass that room, and I think we need to do better at acknowledging some leaders in the past and acknowledging the whole of them as a person. Like, yep, they did some great things, but actually they just did some pretty horrific things as well. And I don't think we're there yet. And then questions, but before that, I just wanted to go back to what people had drawn in that. So I guess for the footballer, what we'd usually do is show pictures of kind of different footballers, and did ask if anybody drew a disabled footballer. Can't really get the answers, but we'd go through and just ask kind of what people drew, and it's usually a link to your bias. So sometimes I've not seen anybody draw. We show a picture of a footballer with a prosthetic leg, and people don't really draw that just by default. And it's because as soon as we kind of say footballer, we've already got preconceived ideas of what those are in our heads. And doing that kind of activity is just a really good way to understand, how our bias is working. So I've talked for a while. And we might want to go to questions. I have got an example of the book here, and it is really easy read, and I think it's really good in terms of people's just lived day-to-day experiences. And that's kind of what came back on the feedback, was that people have really struggled to understand how it just maneuvers through our day-to-day society. And I think having those just quite short experiences of what it is has really helped people to understand.
That's just brilliant. I'm looking now at the comments and questions which Ruth and I are going to be picking up. So the first one is from Ginny. At community links, we look at unconscious bias in our recruitment training. We need to do more work on this, and we're going to take that forward. So that's great. That's a comment. There's a very long comment from our friend who works for Touchstone, who's got some incredibly powerful words there to share, which they're very long, Arthur, so I won't share them if people can't see that on the YouTube channel. Ruth, are there any that you wanted to pick up?
No, but I've got some of the questions, if that's okay. Jodie, the first one we had sent in earlier on was around what's the political theory that's underpinning the concepts of white privilege? I don't know if you know, I certainly don't.
So I think that's more around how the notion that society is based on systems of privilege. And I think it links into I think privilege is an outcome of systemic inequality. And I think that the inequality, it's more of an outcome of it rather than the causing factor, and it probably is a cycle. But yeah, I think it's more of how society is based on systems of privilege. And I think that for me, I'm cis het, I'm a straight cis person, and I've just joined an amazing group on Facebook where it's around trans awareness, and a lot of the posts you can't comment, cis people can't comment for the first 6 hours. So you really just, it's to kind of stop my and other cis people's voices coming to the forefront, and for it to be a place where where people can really share their experiences and their voices not be drowned out. And I really, really like that concept. And it's kind of it's taught me a lot to not center myself. And I think we need to continuously do that and acknowledge our privilege. So when I talked about Googling how racist a holiday destination is, what I don't have to Google is what their kind of policies and culture is like for LGBT people. And if I was a gay Black woman, I'd have to Google it twice. And I think we have to acknowledge the systems of privilege and where we do benefit and where we don't. And I think that's part of, I think in terms of allyship, I don't think allyship is something that it's a constant state. I think it's something that you have to continuously practice and kind of know when spaces are not for you and when it's not your voice that needs to be heard. And how to support other people's voices in being heard.
I've got a couple of questions here, Ruth. One from the Swede and the other from Arfan, both around the term BAME. So I started using it, but I came across people who really disliked it. I'm not sure if being white I should use it. And then Arfan, do you feel the term BAME is prevalent in public discourse and policy is counterproductive and categorises people of colour from a limited white privilege perspective?
I love the questions. I love that we're actually thinking about it. And so my issue with BAME is that it groups everybody in one category. Like it kind of groups everybody it kind of centers whiteness in terms of grouping everybody that's non-white into one category and not understanding the differences between that and within those groups. And I'm just not a fan of the term minority. I know that some universities have stopped using the term BAME and kind of open it for consultation as to what people want to use. Some people, I've got friends that really don't like the term people of colour. So I think I know what my preference is. And I also, as well, just to add, when I'm typing, I capitalise the B in black. That's quite important to me. And I think that I don't think we're probably there yet in terms of a definition that kind of covers everything. But I think what we're moving towards is acknowledging the different groups within that. And it's going to force us to look at it even better in terms of when we're talking about representation. So take I guess the NHS. When we're talking about inequality in the NHS, it's going to force us to kind of look at what the underrepresentation is for Black people, and then within that, the different groups within Black people. It's going to kind of force us to look at people as individuals more, rather than a homogenous group. And I think that's where we're moving towards, to stop kind of using a term that puts everybody together.
Thank you. So we've had a request for sharing of resources, the slides, and to know what your blog address is.
Should I just like send all the links? I've got a folder on my Google Drive which I can where I save loads of reports, just for interesting reading.
And someone was asking who did the illustrations on your slideshow.
So I put them all together using an app, like a design app. And it was so annoying. So this was another issue. So first of all, stock photos, when I type in women into stock images, just white women come up. It was so hard attempting to find, which is why I didn't end up doing it, because they were going to eventually, at first, they were going to be stock images, and I ended up using cartoons because it was so hard to find stock images of Black women and Black men and Black people overall. So then it went to like illustrations, and some of the illustrations you can kind of just use as is, but they all pretty much had straight hair. I had to like change the colour of them. So I uploaded, I'm a bit pedantic. I uploaded like pictures of me and my friends onto a website, and you can kind of colour pick. So I picked the colours out from our actual skin colours to use those, because a lot of the default in terms of the images and the illustrations that were already there were all white, which was just, as I was doing it, I was like, this is just frustrating now, because I'm typing in women and all I'm getting is just a sea of nothing that looks like me or what I'm trying to represent.
Okay, some
Sounds
really
like
questions now. Lindsay has asked, do you have any thoughts on cultural appropriation and the way this is viewed in society? I know we haven't got 4 hours because there's a lot to say.
So I think there's a huge difference between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation. And I think that when I've seen videos that are 110% appropriation, and I've seen videos that are just full appreciation, and there is a very fine line, and probably not something that we're going to get in like a minute, but I do think that we should veer away from cultural appropriation, making money from people's, like monetizing people's culture when the people from that culture can't get money out of it or monetize it themselves is wholly not appropriate. But cultural appreciation is, I think, is a totally different ball game, but that's like a very long discussion.
we've got a question saying, why does society allow more Black people to be sectioned?
Do you know what? That's in the race disparity audit, and obviously I don't work for a mental health charity, but from my experience, it doesn't. The support that you need at the start is not there, and then the behaviours are not seen as mental health behaviours, and the solution is to just straight away, rather than having the treatment in place, is to just straight away to put people into hospital. But that did come out in the race disparity audit, and I do think it's because the treatment is not there and not available. And also sometimes in treatment for mental health, Black people are not listened to, and there's not a lot of Black therapists around. So with the Black Lives Matter movement, there was funding around, and a post going around for Black people to access therapy from Black therapists and mental health care professionals, because I think that's quite important. Yeah, I could probably say a lot more on that from experience.
I think, Jodie, as Black people, we do, because we do this a bit, people make assumptions, and that's another reason why that's the difference between white privilege, isn't it?
Yeah, and people don't, that's what, people don't understand like our actions and where they're coming from. I've had some experiences which are just, it's really hard to understand why it's happening at the time. Like you see somebody and the result is for them straight to get put into hospital, but you know they just need some support. But because of how they're perceived, a lot of the time, well, from my experience, Black men are sometimes just perceived as more aggressive, just with how people see them, and then their actions are that straight to, it's just, rather than treatment, it's just straight to.
And that's why George Floyd's dead, and that's why Eric Garner's dead, and absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a question that Anna's posted off live stream. How can I support my people of colour colleagues? How can I show I care without coming off as patronising, or as though I understand experiences that I clearly can't, even though I'm open to learning?
Do you know what? It's a really hard question. I can tell you how I've had colleagues that have really helped and colleagues that have really not helped whatsoever. And so I can tell you probably the traits that the colleagues that really help have. So listening without that. Well, I experienced that because I've had white colleagues in the past, as I said, tell me that they've experienced effectively racism because of their hair colour. So just listening and not questioning people's experience. So even with a family member recently, I talked about one of my experiences where I was in a meeting and I was working on I used to work on big charity campaigns on and off air, and I was at, I don't know if anyone knows of Harewood House. Harewood House was built on slavery. That's where they got their money from. It's not like they hide it or anything like that. and someone said a really inappropriate comment about how I would have been in the field. I'd have been in the house, not in the field. And I was explaining that to someone quite close to me a couple of weeks ago, and they were just kind of saying, and normally I don't have these conversations with certain people because it's just so draining to have to hear the response of, maybe they didn't mean it like that. So just avoid saying, if someone's telling you about their personal experience of racism, and also if people don't understand the field or the house reference because of my skin tone in slavery days, it's likely that I would have been a house slave, which is what they were referring to. And I think when people talk about those experiences, saying they didn't mean it like that doesn't help. So just listening to try and understand an experience and don't negate from their lived experiences. I don't know if anybody saw the recent donut issue. No, on social media, there was a well-known donut shop that was outed for some examples of racism by an ex-staff member. And some of the comments were just kind of just trying to support just trying to kind of create an explanation and a reason and justify why that person experienced racism. And sometimes there's just no justification for it, and we just want to kind of be heard. And then learn. I've had kind of colleagues, I love to read, and obviously once I've built a relationship up with someone, I've said, oh, this book might be interesting, I'll share this book with you. I think I'd mentioned to them Born a Crime, which is by Trevor Noah, brilliant book. And in turn they said to me, oh, well, I read this book and it was about Black women's hair, and it was a young white guy in the office. I was like, that's really cool that you're kind of, I really liked that they were reading and they were taking what I was saying on board in terms of reading stuff that I was suggesting. So yeah, I think really acknowledging people's lived experiences and don't negate from them. Some of the comments I had around this piece of work, I screenshotted some of them because they were just abysmal, around like basically don't live here if you don't like it. That the notion that I can't critique a country that I'm from because of my colour is absolutely ridiculous and literally part of the privilege. And some comments around like the whole doll thing. People saying that they had gollywog dolls when they were younger, so black dolls did exist and it's not hard to find them. And they loved their gollywog dolls and they should exist now. So I just think really listening to people's lived experiences, and if they're telling you that there is systemic inequality but you've not experienced it, just listen to understand, I think is probably the key thing. And then also when you hear it, call it out, because it's so draining sometimes as a Black person to have to, like, you just get to the point of wanting to pick your battles and you just have to constantly I guess it's a lot better when people are also calling out with you, and making people feel comfortable and like appreciate that people are sharing lived experiences with you as well, and creating that safe space where people can do that.
We've got some really big questions. So what, if anything, can be done to ensure schools review the curriculum around history to ensure colonial times are covered and history is taught more accurately?
There's a petition going around. That's probably there's a petition to get the school system to change, especially history. There's an author called Paula Perry that did the first Black British history book that was approved to go into the curriculum, and that was I think that was 2 years ago, which we probably shouldn't have had firsts about Black British history 2 years ago, but she's an amazing author, and if the schools don't have that book already, they probably should, and it's there and accessible as a resource. Like I said, the link for people to buy it. And then also, so from my friends' experiences and their interactions with education, holding the education establishment as a system to account. I've got friends that are teachers who are absolutely kind of unbelievably passionate about making sure that all history is reflected and the actual true stories. But I think by default, even in the whole notion of it, like his story. History is told by a certain group of people, so a lot of the time women are left out, people of colour are left out, and it's written by a certain group of people. I think it'll change in the future because I think the internet will help as people can document their own experiences. But yeah, sign the petitions and write to schools, ask them what they're doing, hold people to account.
And another question, can race equality only be genuinely achieved if white people with power abdicate their power?
Oh, it's a really
good questions.
Good. So I don't know if I'd say only be achieved, because I guess when you look at some of the movements in the past, like if you take the abolition of slavery, it wasn't necessarily in them times white people giving up their power. I think sometimes that's how the story is told, like there was people, like white men led this big crusade to end it. But I think a lot of the time it wasn't them giving up the power, it was people taking it and kind of fighting for their own equality. So there's Toussaint, who was a leader, a Haitian leader, and then I don't think it was necessarily people giving up their power, it was more of people getting to a point of pure frustration of the atrocities and then deciding to getting too far and taking that power back. So I don't know if that's the only way.
Okay. And do we know why haven't the victims of Windrush been compensated by the government?
I think that's because we live in a systemically racist society, which is I think if we had different leadership or a different government, I think the amount of times the government attempted to suppress some of the research on that, yeah, I could probably go on for that for a while, but I probably shouldn't.
So an easier question about your hair now. So somebody said, obviously you mentioned that people have made comments about your hair when you've been at work, and so the question was, have other people challenged those comments as well, or have you just been on your own facing those?
And there was one two. There was one where it really would have helped if people would have just said that's inappropriate, like, because it ended up me being in an office where I'm the only person in braids and the only Black woman in the office, trying to explain the cultural context of my hair and why what you're saying is offensive. And it's, again, I don't think that, like, I'm still, a lot of the time I'm quite a chilled out person, surprisingly, and I'll remain friends with a lot of my colleagues, so I'm still quite close to some of the people, and they've changed their perception and understand why. But that whole learning, that conversation and that whole unraveling and learning, it's not necessarily my labour to have to do. I shouldn't have to explain why your comment was inappropriate in an office setting. And the Bob Marley comment, that really would have helped if some people would have just been like, that was at the I was getting my lunch at that point as well, which I really like food, so I feel like they ruined my whole food experience. And I think all you need to do is just say your hair looks nice. And I understand why I think I get why people do it. It's because, like, I'm used to seeing people with afros, with weaves, with wigs, with braids, with long braids, short braids, box braids, with locks. I'm used to seeing a huge range of hairstyles. But for somebody who isn't, I think sometimes they would see my hair and their only reference point in their head is for something which looks remotely similar, and that's what they kind of connect it with, and it just comes out without them even thinking about it. But no one said anything. No one said anything at the time. I think people would now, because I'm a lot more vocal about it, rather than it just, I'm a lot more vocal about it now. So I think people probably would.
I think this fits in nicely. So we've got a question from Finn, and you've partially answered it, but he's saying, but they're saying, is there a good balance to be found between calling out racism and not speaking over for people of colour who are also present when it happens? So it picks up something that you've just said, but also there's a little bit of a different dynamic there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like someone said that to me, and then I started talking and they talked over me. I have a small issue with people constantly talking over me. It's one of the microaggressions that it really drains me. But yeah, I think it links to the whole taking up space when it's not necessarily a space for your voice. And it is, there are some really good examples of where it's really worked and where people have said, specifically again in the creative sector, where people have said, actually, that role isn't for me, it should be given to this person, or it should be given to another person, or from another group, and I think that knowing when to support, like when your voice is needed and when it's not. And if it's in support of, I've not really seen many examples of where it's been seen as a negative, if it's in support of that, if that makes sense. I think a lot of the time where I get frustrated when, so an example on LinkedIn, I put a post up about the race card and how the term is just really frustrating when people use it, because I think when people use it, they're just dismissing, I guess, an example or an accusation of racism with the term, that's the race card, but not actually understanding why the person would explain that it's linked to race. And I tried to explain this on LinkedIn, and some people commented in favour of using and trying to defend their use of the race card rather than just listening. And I think that when there was other white people on the post which explained why they thought it was offensive, was brilliant. I think that's brilliant to put that in.
So another question is, when using the phrase black people, does this refer to Asian people too? Often I've been told by white people, white privilege doesn't impact on me and my life because I'm Asian, even if my experiences say otherwise.
So I don't think that white people can tell a black or an Asian person or a person of colour that white privilege doesn't impact their life. That again goes to the whole, that is literally privilege. That goes to the whole conversation of, I've not experienced it, I've not seen your experience of it, but you don't live their lived experiences. So I don't think people can say that. And when I say, it's really odd actually, the whole, I think that there are Asian people that are also black people, if that makes sense. You can have black Asian people, but I think if an Asian person defines themselves and is Asian, then they're an Asian person, and they will be impacted by white privilege, because in the same way, like, there's differences. So if one of my friends that I go to Jamaica with, she's got Indian and Jamaican heritage, and her hair's it's not like mine, it's quite straight, and there are differences. So even in the systems of privilege there, my hair is not seen as nice hair at all, whereas her hair is seen as like the best hair ever. And I think that, like, she benefits in certain ways that I don't. But in terms of, like, I just think that's absolutely ludicrous for someone to say that you don't benefit, that it doesn't impact you, when you know in your lived experiences that it does. And then when you look at colonization, and I could probably talk about that for a while, and I'll stop myself. But I don't think I don't think that somebody can tell you that. I've often been told by white people that, that's just ludicrous. That's like somebody saying, it's like a white man saying, racism doesn't exist. It's just like, it's not for me to say that in this country transphobia doesn't exist. I that's just ridiculous, because what I have to do is listen to people that are trans and saying yes, it exists, and then I would be like, yes, they're experiencing it.
And a different kind of question now, who or what is your inspiration?
I think, so it's really odd. I grew up as I think I grew up just very different, and I've had a lot of resilience from quite a young age because of it. And when, like even going, I'm in quite a big meat eater family. So I was like the butt of the jokes for not eating meat, for like refusing to eat meat as a child. I finally got my mum to turn veggie after 28 years of hounding her. But yeah, I think I grew up quite resilient anyway. And then as I got older, I started to read a lot. I really like reading. So I really like, now specifically, there's people that I watch and follow that I absolutely love. I read a lot of James Baldwin, Ivan Van Sertima. He's got quite lengthy YouTube videos. He did a book called They Came Before Columbus, which was a lot of history that had just been missed out. He's got a really good YouTube video about it. Yeah, I read a lot of James Baldwin. Stuart Hall. So I read, he's a sociologist. I read a lot of Stuart Hall when I was like at university. And then, quite exciting, there's a bookshop in London on, I think it's Caledonian Road, called Houseman's. And they had Stuart Hall's library. So his wife had donated like his library of books to the bookshop, and they were selling his old books off at £1 each. I've got loads of them, like signed with notes in. It's actually amazing. So yeah, Stuart Hall was quite a big one. And then now Munro Bergdorf, I absolutely love her. I think she's just absolutely phenomenal. I really liked Afua Hirsch's book. That was brilliant. I read quite a lot. I really like reading. So yeah, authors, a lot of authors that kind of that I think go the extra mile to really show stories about equality is probably the one for me.
So Jodie, you mentioned a book a bit earlier, and someone's just asking, was it Paula Perry?
Yeah, I'll send a link to it. It's Black British history. It's got like tasks in it as well. It's an actual workbook that you can work through. I did it as an adult, but it's meant for schools. And
there's been several requests for your blog address, so people can...
Oh yeah, I'll send that.
Brilliant. Yeah. Any more questions, Ruth?
Should we do one more, because we're getting to the end now? So it's quite a meaty question again. So about choosing housing as a white person, if you want to be a white ally, how do you do this to avoid ghettoisation, but also to avoid gentrification, and how might this be navigated?
I think if that's for like, I think gentrification, it's not necessary. I think gentrification is like bigger than individuals choosing houses. It's about the amount of like money in terms of like government and systems that's plunged into an environment to push people out. And I think if that is purchasing a house, because sometimes you don't really get to choose where you live, which was, I guess my experience has been, when we were younger, we didn't really get to choose. We just got put in whatever house. And if we did choose, I could imagine that we wouldn't have chosen the estate that I was on. But yeah, you kind of get put in whatever housing you get. But I guess for purchasing, I've always seen gentrification as like a bigger thing than individuals. Like, I think it's more around the amount of money that's been plunged into some areas and not other areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There were just a couple of comments from an anonymous attendee. Someone saying thank you for your webinar. They're part of a white family and they're adopted sisters from Kenyan heritage. And they, I don't know who it is, they are in a biracial relationship. So today's really helps them, thank you. And another attendee has struggled to understand where they're from and the struggle to complete monitoring forms because they came to this country from Africa in 1972. They're seen as British subjects, but they struggle with their own identity. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it's, yeah, thank you for sharing. I think it's such an interesting concept because like identity as a whole, and I think if we was in a country which was more just where it was normalized to speak about race, people would be able to explore their own identity a lot more. And I think I grew up not being able to have as open conversations as I should have been around kind of race and colour and identity. And I think if we all get to a point where we're just comfortable having those conversations, it's easier for people to explore that identity. Then I found it in books. I found it in just reading.
Okay.
And if anyone wants the book, I kind of do this a lot. If anyone really wants to like read one of the books but can't afford them, I tend to send out books for people that want to read them. So if anyone wants one, but they can't kind of access it due to finances, I tend to just send out books to people.
Can you remind us when your books? Sorry, go on.
When's your book coming out, Jodie? We're dying to buy it.
Sorry, I'm eating grapes. So it's on, I've put it on Etsy, it's on Etsy at the moment. Oh, there's loads of I've just seen one pop up, there's loads of recommendations for children's books. I'll write a list and share it. But it's on Etsy at the moment, so I'll share the link.
Brilliant. Yeah. And obviously within Touchstone and Inclusion North, we'll also share the link internally.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So I think, is that the last question that we're going to take today? Do you think we might be coming to the end of our time? So just a massive thanks to Jodie for coming along and sharing all your knowledge with us. That's been really great. I always find that I'm just still learning so much about white privilege and how to become anti-racist as opposed to being not racist. And I know that we're all at different points on our journey. And I think events like this kind of help bring us more onto the same page so that we can move forward together.
Yeah, I don't think it's like a status. I don't think it's like an ending, like you learn and then it ends. I think it's just continuous. Like, I feel like I'll still be learning in 30, 40, 50 years, hopefully 60 years time.
Definitely. And someone had asked about what's next, and I think that's something that I understand as chief execs of organisations, we've got a massive responsibility to make change happen within our organisations. But I'm really keen that everyone kind of signs up to doing something individually as well for themselves to make sure that they keep learning. So I'm sure that both Touchstone and Inspire North will be doing lots of different things to keep moving the agenda forward in our organisations, but we can all also, as people, whether at work or at home, just keep making a change in relation to racism so that maybe together we can make sure that racism does get eradicated in our lifetimes. Because you're quite young, Jodie, you're certainly a lot younger than me, and it's really still very sad to hear, you know, and we know it happens still that children really young are experiencing racism from school right the way through their lifetimes, and you know, we've got to stop.
I think one of the saddest things that came from people's experiences was having to have conversations with young children about racism because of their experiences. That was one of the really sad ones. We went to, before we leave, we had a huge kids trip. It was like a school trip to Belgium. We took loads of children. We were outnumbered by kids. It was really intense. I don't know whose idea it was, in the school holidays. So lots of adults took lots of children, and we was all black apart from my niece, and I think she was walking through Belgium, a huge black group of children and a few adults and my niece, and people were staring at her, like really staring at her, and she thought they were staring because of her hair was messy. And I was like, I love the naivety, but I'm not sure that's why they are staring. And then that really upset, that was the sad thing of having to have conversations with young children about issues of society that shouldn't be affecting them is very sad.
It is. And we've all got a part to play in making sure that we can make that difference and make a change. So thank you very much. Thanks for everyone for coming today. Thank you, Alison, for making it happen as ever.
You're very welcome, and
you,
let's continue the conversation, everybody. Staff of Inclusion North and Touchstone, we welcome your feedback, we welcome your ideas. Please help us carry on this conversation, because we want the world that our children grow up in to be better than the world we're experiencing today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
The obligatory wave. Bye.
Bye.